super quick. My company, Jeffrey Scott Consulting, we help landscape entrepreneurs to fix, scale, or exit your business. Sometimes two of the three, and sometimes all three. So to learn more about it and me and our company, you can go to jeffreyscott.biz. By the way, since the pandemic, I've been putting out a podcast. I got a bit lonely during the pandemic, lonely, quote unquote, and I wanted to chat with more people. And so I started a long form podcast, The Ultimate Landscape CEO. It's been a huge hit, and you can learn from a lot of people I interview on that podcast. So I would definitely urge going onto that podcast. If anyone in the webinar chat is enjoying the podcast, just give a shout out so that others can see how beneficial it is. It's a labor of love. Definitely a lot to learn there, including about incentives. I'm going to reference one of my podcasts where we got into some unique incentives and bonuses. And so check that out. The agenda today, quite simply, we're going to talk about profit sharing, commissions, incentives. And I mean, really, we could have done a webinar on any one of these topics. For some reason, we decided on all three. I think it was just the way it evolved. And so I have created for you really interesting points on all three. And you'll see there's some repeating themes, right? What works, how to make things work. And so I think it's really good actually to cover all three. And so you can compare and contrast, look for commonalities, look for differences. So let's talk first about 5 truths that I know to be inherently true. Number 1, your programs will change. You can't ever create the perfect program and never change it, in part because your goals are going to change. Even profit sharing will change. If you've read The Great Game of Business, shout out in the chat if you've read it. It's a great book. And they talk about setting a new goal every single year on balance sheets. And therefore, the game, the incentive, the profit sharing plan goals change. And so and that's the gold standard. And there they change. And so your employees have to expect, hey, we're putting this in place, but as our goals change, we're going to change the plan or tweak it, every year or every other year. And so just come to expect that because we're a living, breathing organization. Number 2, incentives do not fix your underlying problems. Too many people wish, hope, think they can slap on an incentive and it'll just fix it all, fix the problems I'm having. And I think of it a lot like throwing a turbocharger onto a car. Many of you know I like to race cars, and you don't want to add a faster motor or a turbocharger onto your car until you've taken care of a lot of the basics. And in racing, a lot of that has to do with brakes and even seatbelts and harnesses. And so you can't, just like in racing, you can't necessarily get faster just with a faster engine. Same goes in your company. You can't just slap on the incentive and hope to fix different issues you have in your company. And so you really, if you have a weak culture, et cetera, you've got to fix that stuff first before you turbocharge it with incentives. Number 3, you want to keep things stupid simple. Or is that keep things simple stupid? Either way, you want to follow KISS. Your program should be easy to explain, easy to understand. The person on the receiving end should be able to roll out of bed in the morning, go to their computer, or just go to their piece of paper and pencil and calculate how much they're earning, right? Like the stock market. Let me just check it out and see how I'm doing, or do the simple math in their head. And it's got to be easy to administrate. So if you overthink it, over complexify it, try to make it too perfect, it will like strangle itself, like roots in a root ball, right? Got to keep the dirt loose and cut away any hindrances and let those roots go. And same with a good incentive plan. Keep it loose. Number four, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but sometimes the rewards come first before the result. I know it sounds crazy, but I'll give you an example. I have a good client on Cape Cod, and he buys boots for his guys. I think he has them branded with his company uh, every spring, and they love it. You can bet your butt that that is an incentive. That incentivizes them. It motivates them. Uh, and so things like that, they are incentives. They're not if then incentives. They're, hey, you guys are great. Proud of you. I'm investing in you. And then the reward comes afterwards. Now, obviously, you can't give everybody $5,000 and expect them to kick butt all year, but little rewards can really can become big incentives, and that can be perks, that can be food and parties. So I'm just going to start off this whole talk here by saying that sometimes it's the simple things done consistently with heart and passion can go a long way. And number five, the fifth truth is careful what you wish for. Because when you put money in a direction, right? I want you to go that way. Everybody's going to go that way. And they're going to go, and they may go to the detriment of other goals that you have going on. And especially the more money you put on that incentive. And so careful for what you ask for. You're going to get a certain amount of short-term thinking, meaning there's the goal right in front of my face, so I'm going after it. That's the short-term thinking. And people will maybe let go of other goals. And so you always have to be sort of holistic in your management, and also when you put incentives out there. Otherwise, the more short-term thinking you are, the more you're going to get that behavior. And so definitely standards and written standards, strong culture, quality control. Those three things are very important to create that holistic approach or environment, if you will, towards your incentives. Okay, so those are five truths. Now we're going to talk about profit sharing. And I would say the big learning point here, and Sean Baxter brought this to my attention. He's been a long-term client. He's an executive coach in the Jeffrey Scott organization, runs a couple peer groups. He said, it's taken all of us a bit to get on that transparency bandwagon. So it's hard for people to do profit sharing and other items when they're used to holding things close to their vest. But in the Jeffrey Scott community, we really teach, leadership and transparency and honesty, and that's key to making this program work. But it's uncomfortable if you don't live in that environment where you're used to being open, honest, transparent. It is an absolute key to any type of motivation, and it's certainly key for profit sharing. Here are some obstacles, quotes that have come across my desk when it comes to profit sharing. I can't afford it. That's a common point to hear. We don't make enough money to do profit sharing. Aha, chicken and egg. Which comes first? Making money so we can do profit sharing, or profit sharing so we can make more money? Well, if you're not making money, it's hard to just do that. Although a lot of companies do jump into profit sharing. If you've read the Great Game of Business, right? That's how that story begins. We're not making money. We need a Hail Mary. We're going to open the books and do profit sharing. They throw the Hail Mary and it works. Now, not all Hail Marys work. We all know that. And so I'm going to give you some techniques on how to make sure that you can land that pass and get it working for you. So if you can't afford it, pay less until you can pay more. If you're making less money, then you can pay a lot less until the profits start to build up, right? You can start with a smaller payout. Number two, you can do what they say to do in the Great Game of Business. You can add a balance sheet goal, because if you don't have the money to pay for profit sharing, you probably can see that suffering on your balance sheet, your debt to equity, or your current ratio. And so you can set some balance sheet goals that say, we're only going to do a full payout if we also hit this balance sheet goal. Otherwise, we're just going to pay 50%, for example, of our payout. In the great game of business, there's no payout unless the profit goal is hit and the balance sheet goal. But, you know, that's how the book says to do it now. When you read the book, you'll realize, oh, there was a journey for them and how they got there. And so I don't know that I would even say you should do that out the gate. But if you're having trouble affording it, you could say, the full payout means we've got to hit both goals. And of course, you can spread out payments. You don't need to pay everything out January 31st. In fact, you can use it in part as a retention bonus. You could say, we're going to pay some out right away and some out in spring when and whoever's here gets that. It's a discretionary bonus. Clearly, you've got to work with lawyers and set it up so that you're following your HR laws, the national laws, right? This is not an HR webinar. This is not a legal webinar. You've got to get with your experts to make sure you're following the current laws. They always change. But if it's discretionary and you're treating it as part of it as a retention bonus, if you will, you can pay some out later. And you might need to from a cash flow perspective. So as long as you're within the laws, you can set it up so that it works for you. And I always tell people that to try to set it up discretionary, because what if something terrible happens where all of a sudden you don't have the cash? And you always have to worry about the black swans or write them into your program. And so I do believe these programs should be discretionary, because if you're working as a team, there could be a black swan event that's basically a big that hits your company where all of a sudden you don't have that money now to pay the full payment or the second payment. So I do believe setting it up as a discretionary program within the laws. You have to check in the laws, but I do believe that's an important thing to do. So that's all about I can't afford it. How much should I pay out? I had to give this some thought. I have a huge amount of anecdote, but I decided on the 10 to 20% range, plus or minus. And it really depends on how many people are in your plan. It depends on what your minimums are, right? You don't just pay it out right away. You've got to hit certain minimums so that you can cover your expenses, maybe the owner's true salary, CapEx, working capital, because you're growing, so you need more cash to run the business. And all that will go into figuring out the right approach. But let's say you're hitting it at 100%. What is that payout? It's going to be different for different companies. The more people you have in the plan, the more money it will take. What if it's just one person in your plan? Maybe it's your general manager, I don't know, or it's just your leadership team, 4 people. Well, then you're going to devise it differently. Now, if you're going to start there and end somewhere else, you've got to think about the end first before you start rolling it out. But don't forget the token payments. What if we just made 6% profit and the plan says we've got to hit 10? In my book, you don't want to change the rules and all of a sudden, all right, we're going to give you some kind of small payout. I would build that in, the sort of token payouts in the beginning to help build believability and traction until you start hitting your minimum goals. Build it right in, because that question is going to hit you and maybe haunt you when you miss your goals. And so that's why I would recommend that. What about personal accountability? This is a big topic. We had this discussion in one of my recent peer groups. If you don't know me, within Jeffrey Scott, we run peer groups for landscape business owners, and we also run a group for seconds in command. And at one of our recent peer group meetings, 2 people said, our plan's not quite working. The guys in the field feel like, God, I do all this effort and we're not getting enough of a payout. our company doesn't pay out consistently enough. And so there's three ways to deal with personal accountability. Three ways. Number one, extreme accountability, which means as a company, you do not tolerate non-performers. If every employee who's in the company knows that the non-performers are out of the company or they don't get to participate, then those that are giving their 100% will be a lot happier with, hey, all for one and one for all. But if as an employee, I can look around the company and see, no, you guys let a lot of people slack. I don't buy this profit sharing program. I was talking to a company yesterday, and one of the employees I just said hi to privately on the chat, and he was saying, we really are letting a lot of slackers hang around the company, and revenue's off a little bit, and when the water goes down, you can see the slackers, right? Water goes down, you see the bumps sticking out from the bottom of the ocean bed or riverbed. And why would everyone else give their all when they can just look around and see the slackers? So the first way to deal with this is really to have a low tolerance for slackers and a very accountable leadership approach to addressing, preventing, dealing, promoting to another company, the slackers. So that's one way to make sure that people buy in. The other way is to have simply a personal grading system. Now, one of my clients does that. He was on a podcast with me 2 years ago, John Puryear, and he has a personal grading system that, and his company is at least 50% Latino, and it works. But the personal grading system means that creates the personal accountability. And so, hey, if I'm really doing well, I'm going to get above average. And if that guy's slacking, well, he's going to get below average. And so that creates that personal accountability and that feeling of that I can really have an impact, and I better have an impact. The other way to create personal accountability is through departmental weighting. And I also wrote about this in my newsletter, Greg Wildeber, Whispering Pines. And the profit sharing is weighted by how you're doing in your department. And sometimes you can work in multiple departments, snow, for example, right? Winter and summer. And so the personal accountability happens within a smaller group that's easier to manage where, hey, we're all accountable and it's a small team. And together we can have an impact by having our department do well. And then that helps us share in the company-wide profit sharing. So those are two ways to develop personal accountability, or this is three ways in total. You have to do one of these three ways, meaning if it's just you're doing profit sharing and you expect the accountability to just happen, well, the bigger you get, the more that is not really true. And so as you scale your company, you've got to keep things tight, if you will. What if we had a bad year? Well, that's an important point. Every company, 99% of companies are going to have a bad year. And right. And so I think it's important to have the talk every year. Hey, guys, gals, we just made this payout. Save some of this money. Don't go spending it all. Don't spend it all on presents or, paying off your debt, or you better put some away. Like, you have to teach people in effect what to do with this money, because not every year is going to be a great year. Oh, we've had 3 great years in a row. Guys, I'm telling you, every year is a new beginning. Take some of this money and, you could even be teaching fiscal accountability at home and how home finances should happen. And I think that's not a bad idea anyways. So I think it's always important to reset expectations. And number 2, don't let it be a surprise if you're having a bad year, which I'm going to get to in a second. Do not let it be a surprise. Everybody should see everything coming in that given year. Now, point 3 here, which I didn't put, but I will mention, is what if you're starting off in a bad year, like The Great Game of Business? Well, go read that book. Although, they didn't write that book the first year they did everything, right? What I've learned is when you read books about war, this is a sort of a metaphor here, but when you read books about war, those books are always very clear. There's a start, there's a middle, there's an end. But if you ever read a journal from somebody writing who's in war, it's chaotic. You can't follow any line from here to there. It could never be published into a movie the way it was written, because war is chaos, war is hell. And so the point is, if you're starting off with doing this in a bad year, yes, read The Great Game of Business, but it wasn't as simple as they said in that book. And so that's where I said you can have token payouts for small profits, and then they can escalate and accelerate as you make more. So I think those are the ways to handle that. And by the way, employees appreciate the transparency needed on its own. Honestly, that's a certain incentive on its own when you're just trusting employees with information. That's a big incentive. So I kicked off this webinar by saying sometimes giving everybody a pair of boots and other rewards as you go or beforehand is an incentive. And also trusting your team and sharing and being transparent is also an incentive. And so don't forget these incentives. Some of you have seen that movie Glengarry Glen Ross. Not all incentive plans have to run like a used car dealership, which we all know by now, and you know by listening to my podcasts. And so a lot of things that we can do to increase the motivation and take advantage of people's inherent motivation. How often should I talk about the program? This is key. I could have started off with this. I'm going to end with this. You've got to talk at least monthly. Now, Drost, where the company we visited a couple of years ago for our summer growth summit, they do it twice a month, which means you've really got to be on top of your P&Ls, which is a good thing. At a minimum, you've got to talk monthly. And to do that, you need accurate monthly numbers, an accurate budget versus actual. And the actual's got to have all the billings in, the receipts in. You really want to do it accrual based so it doesn't fluctuate year to year, and so that you can create a budget and the actual can match the budget. And so those are very important. And then when you do it monthly, you have to connect the dots. And that can mean, hey, here's how we're doing. We have 3 departments. One department's struggling. We need to try to help it. And we are with marketing, or maybe it's weather, timing, maybe it's workforce. But you also want to connect the dots for everybody in the company. Everybody should know in the company what they need to do to help along the progress. And that could happen in your monthly meeting or in a breakout afterwards. You've got to connect the dots for everyone. And if the profit sharing includes everyone, then they should all be in that monthly meeting, ideally. So you've got to work that out. Lastly, you could even go as far as saying, here's how we're doing on the budget versus actual, and here's our profit pool. We expected it to grow, and here's how it's growing. And so you really could spell it all out. Don't make any assumptions. Don't assume because you said it once, they'll remember it. Because you said it 5 times, they'll remember it. Because you said it 5 times and you've thought about it 5 more times, that they're also thinking about it 5 more times. All those are bad assumptions. And so you have to over-communicate, over-connect the dots, leave room for questions, and even seed the conversations. Any questions? Oh, no, none. All right, back to work. That doesn't work, right? So you've got to teach, you got to you've got to consider this whole thing an educational process and treat it as such. So when in doubt, start small. Small can mean a couple things. Start small could mean we're sharing the information without dollars attached to it. Okay, playing it safe. Or we're we're doing this just in our leadership team, and we're poking holes with the leadership team to so and getting the leadership team on board so they can educate everyone else. When the owner turns around and you have the meeting after the meeting, whether it's profit sharing or incentives or commissions, you want the other managers, other people to say, yeah, this is a good system. Oh no, I understand it. Yeah, here's how it works. Right? This is it's like having a big family and everybody's got to be on board. So those are a couple ways to start small. All right. We're now going to talk about commissions. Every year, my commission percentage goes down and my sales goals go up. That's a common phrase, complaint. And it's common because it's true. And it's true because, we're investing more marketing, more branding, we're giving you more support. And so from this huge investment, margins maybe got tighter. So for all these reasons, your commission percentage has to go down a little bit. And because we're growing and because you've got more support now, we expect you to sell more. And so things do change, and they don't change every year to the salesperson's advantage. Now, you don't want them to feel, what's the word? You don't want them to feel like, hey, I just can't win here. Obviously, that will backfire. But having said that, things do change. Goals do go up. Costs do go up. In tough years, margins do get tighter. And so it's important that you just kind of recognize that and that you've got a transparency with your sales team so they recognize it. Again, don't take this to the extreme because you will piss them off and you'll lose their attention and their motivation. I'm just trying to be realistic here and say that things do change. And it's worse in the corporate world, by the way. In the corporate world, they'll change commissions quarterly. Oh, new quarter, things have changed. We're changing your commission plan. So salespeople have it good, I believe, here in the green industry, because we think more in annual terms. So just a little bit of FYI there, but you've got to keep a balance. So now let's dive into commissions. Here's some challenges I hear about. I tried it once, but the salesperson keeps selling cheap work, so I gave up on it. Right? Obviously, that's a shame. The salesperson made money last year, but we all lost money. That's not good. It can happen, obviously, but everybody in the sales team shouldn't be making huge money while the company loses, right? That means things are a little bit out of whack there. The estimating system's not accurate enough. Okay. There's a lot of ways these days to fix estimating systems. So unless you're jerry-rigging your system, that should be fixable. The salesperson's always gaming the system. Yes, welcome to the land of enlightened self-interest. You've heard that expression before, enlightened self-interest. That's the whole point of commissions. You're putting a game out there so the salespeople will follow the game. And if they're like, oh, it's like playing Monopoly. Wait a minute, if I do this, this, and this, I can skip around and make more money. That's what they're going to do. And so they're going to game the system. That's where you want to get holes poked in your system. And by the way, that's also why you change systems as you go. So all these challenges are true, and we want to try to alleviate them as much as we can, within a certain balance. So I'm going to run through some different challenges. If you're working with your salesperson to create the commission, you're already negotiating against yourself, because a better salesperson is going to negotiate with you on their compensation and if their input is to help develop the commission plan, if you give them too much rope, they're going to set it up so it works in their favor. In a way, that's what you want them to do. You want your salespeople to be excellent negotiators. because they're out representing your company with your clients, right? If all your salespeople are pushovers, meh, they may not be great salespeople either. Like I said, it's a balance. Now, the sales manager should not be selling as well. I know it's hard not to do. Um, and I know I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I know when you're smaller, you kind of do that. But if your commission plan pays them commission for selling, as well as you're trying to incentivize them for sales management, that will backfire. So you have to be very careful of how you're setting up your sales manager's compensation plan. And when they're commissioned two different ways, it's going to skew everything. And when they're commissioned or incentivized even one way, you have to make sure they have the company's best interest at heart when you're negotiating against them on what the commission should be. So, if this was easy, everybody would be in business, right? So I'm just giving you some traps to watch out for as you go about setting up your plans. High base, high commission. What salesperson doesn't want high base and high commission? I just had that discussion with a client the last few weeks. It doesn't work that way. You want a high base, you're going to have low commission. You want to earn a lot of money, we're going to give you a low base. That's what it's called, risk and reward. Let's just pick a number. Let's say your cost of sales should be around 10% or 8%. Might be a little higher, 12% in some circumstances. It doesn't mean, though, that everyone's going to earn that amount all the way up their sales goal ladder. It's just an average. It doesn't mean that if I pay someone a high base, that they're going to be earning that high percentage. No, because they're taking less risk, so they're going to have lower reward. Risk and reward really is I think a driving issue. Now I have one client where it's a very low base, zero base, and everyone gets a high commission. Ultimately, he has a high cost of sales. He's got to be okay with that because ultimately it impacts your P&L at the end of the year. So let me just say in the bullet points here, high base, low commission, that means a moderate package. What does low commission mean? These are just some numbers for conversation. When I get into specific conversations, when I'm coaching and consulting, that's when we adapt these general principles. But it might be commissions of 2 to 3%, 1 to 3%. They may escalate up. It really depends on the base, etc. Now, if you have a low base or a zero base, then you could have a much higher commission. And that commission might be 8 or 10%. And that's sort of an eat what you kill environment. So what's not fair to anyone is high base and high commission. And so first, as an owner or sales manager, you've got to decide what kind of environment do I want to create? Is it eat what you kill? Is it more, hey, we're on a team and everyone gets a little bit of commission? You've got to decide as ownership or leadership what you're comfortable with and what kind of company culture you really want to create long term. And then you build the program around that. Commissions. Dirty sales, clean sales. Let's talk about this. Dirty sales, or the lack of clean sales, is a big issue. And so if you're incentivizing someone to make a lot of sales and their sales are dirty, loose ends in the sale, verbal promises not written down, things that will backfire, that's when your commission incentive plan is backfiring. You don't have enough controls on what's happening in the sales process. So commissions really only work when you have clean sales. And so you really need to put constraints and controls and active management to make sure that you don't have dirty sales. You don't have quick sales where you just tie up the loose ends after the sale's been made. Now, some of you might say, we do it that way. It works. Nobody complains. We're making a lot of money. Okay, you're the exception. But many of you out there are like, oh yeah, we have that issue. then you have to address it head on. Same goes with change orders, right? Verbal change orders invariably come back to bite you. You've got to have a system for getting them in writing. Scope creep invariably comes back to bite you. We're having a conversation with a client last week, and he said, well, if it takes just an hour, go do that, go do it. Every week in maintenance, just an extra hour, go do it. That adds up. Now, if it's only an hour long maintenance client, for some of you, you'll say, well, that doesn't make sense. But even if you're there all day, an hour adds up. My point is, scope creep will backfire and will make you unhappy. Scope creep can happen because your clients had an ill-defined scope or weren't clear of it, and that can happen from an unclean sales process. So to make all these commissions work, you've got to make the sales process work. Production can often be upset, and so here's 5 ways to address it. First off, you need accountability to your systems, like I was just talking about before, right? Mr. Salesperson, Mrs. Sales Lady, don't make your drama my drama, right? That's what production's saying. Hey, don't make your drama my drama. So you have to have good accountability to systems so this last minute drama isn't happening and bleeding down from the sales team down to the production team. Number 2, you could have production buy out the work before they sell it, meaning they approve of the estimate, or even they produce the estimate, where estimating can sit within production. That's another way to address production's upset. You could have the project managers actually sell the work, and I have a few clients doing it that way. Production's never upset because they're the ones doing the actual sales. You could have your sales commissions based on as built. All right, production's upset, but at least salespeople are in the same boat as production. And lastly, you can do a monthly job cost review or a monthly review to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're working through our differences. So that's how we can deal with production being upset. Now, when is sales upset? Well, sometimes they're upset when production is just blowing it, or lazy, or unorganized, right? So we could put production on the same incentive as sales. Wow, we're now all on the same page. By the way, profit sharing can do the same thing. And so that begets another question about profit sharing. Do we have profit sharing and commissions? Generally, that defeats profit sharing. Some of you might do it that way. But generally, if you have a strong commission program and maybe you weight it by department, and the design build department or the maintenance department are feeling the same pains and working together, that can be a way around it. But if you're doing the commission route, you could put production on some kind of incentive that's similar. So then sales will be less upset. And of course, for simple work, you could just commission sales on the work as estimated. You might even commission them on the top line. I know it sounds crazy, but if it's really simple work, cookie cutter work, the estimating is simple. The mistakes aren't really the salesperson's fault because you have enough controls. That's a way to deal with it. Maximizing impact on commissions. So frequency of payouts helps. I've heard of companies where they pay out at the end of the year, even end of the quarter. Hey, if it works, all the power to you. But frequency of payouts helps get people's attention. Pavlov's dog. Google it if you don't know that story. But the more frequently you can ring the bell and give the dog the bone, the more you're going to get them to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Number 2, pay more for what you want more of and less of what you want less of. If you've got a salesperson selling new maintenance contracts and enhancements, and they're a business developer and you don't want them to focus on enhancements, rather, you want them to focus on new work, you commission them more on new work and much less on enhancements. There could be a vice versa, where you've got an account manager that's selling enhancements and some new work. but they're focusing too much on the new work. You can then pay them more on the enhancements. So you could have subbed work, which doesn't cover your overhead. You can pay us less of a commission on the subbed work. You really got to look at which way the money's pointing. And that's another reason why commission plans do change as your environment changes. Maybe you're going to sub more work out next year. The plan's going to change. Number 3 here, temporary bonuses on mini games. It's just fine to have a temporary bonus. For example, we're trying to get design build to sell more maintenance. It's a common frame. All right, this year, we're going to pay an extra bonus on it. Next year, it's going to be an expectation or a part of your job, or we're going to pay just a normal small amount of commission. But this year, we're going to double that commission or triple. It's a mini game with a temporary bonus. I'm all in favor of it. By the way, if you keep the commissions the same, if you've somehow figured out how to keep everything the same year over year over year over year, it can lose a bit of attraction and attention. That's why mini games like this can help raise the excitement, keep people moving. Okay. That was commissions. Incentives. They work until they don't. Now, we visited A+ Lawn and Landscape a few years ago for our summer growth summit, and they showed us one of their incentives. And I texted the owner, and he said, "Yep, it's still working. That plan." I'll be curious if I texted one of the some of the employees from that company if they would say the same. There may actually be one here on the program, but that's a rarity. It's hard to get incentives to work the same over and over and over and over and over again. Not impossible. It's just hard. Many incentives kind of work until they don't. And so incentives do not work on their own. They're not like AI where it magically works on its own. But incentives need a lot of management. You need constant keeping them excited, keeping them top of mind. They need constant attention and management, just like your kids, right? Even when your kids graduate and leave home, they still need, some of them, constant attention and management. Not management, constant attention. So don't think that incentives are set it and forget it, and don't think they'll always work forever. Production incentives. There's many ways to do this. I was thinking about my podcast, and I did one 2 years ago with Chris O'Brien from Limwalker Tree. It's a great podcast of mine on the Ultimate Landscape CEO. Go back and listen to it. He's a creative guy. He's got some fun incentives for how to set up incentive plans. One common way that I've seen work, and we learned about this sort of through LMN 10 years ago, although they did it a slightly more idealistic way. And we learned about this at A+ Lawn and Landscape. And it seems to be a good way to work, where if the crew hits their billable hours for that week, they get $1 per hour or 50 cents per hour. And for some of you, it might be they have to beat their billable hours by 5%, let's say, to get that goal. But more or less, it's if you can hit your billable hours, you get something for it. And the whole incentive there is to get foremen to think like owners, because ultimately you make money when you budget the correct billable hours and you achieve that goal every week and every month. The biggest issue for profitability I see is setting the budget up wrong. But even if you set it up correctly, the schedule gets behind and you're getting behind on your billable hours. That's the biggest killer of profitability. So if every crew was incentivized every week to not only hit their billable hours of the jobs they're given, but even work a little harder and take one extra job per week, or start a job a day earlier so they could start working on the next bonusable program. And if every foreman did that out of self-interest, then the department has the best chance of hitting or beating its billable hours. Now, you do have to work with Department of Labor overtime rules, and you will have to, you can't just do incentives necessarily like this without showing the Department of Labor that you're paying overtime rules. So you've got to talk to your state's HR lawyer on these issues and make sure your plan is following the federal and state laws on overtime. But if it is, then you can use that kind of system. So that's a great production system. The problem I see with production incentives that say that's only based on uh, beating hours is, hey, if you beat hours, we're going to give you a certain percentage of it. Uh, the only problem I see with that is you may beat hours on all your jobs, but you may not do enough jobs in the week, in the month to hit your billable hours goal you need to make money. Because that's how you make money. Make no mistake about it. It's not by beating hours on any given job. It's by fulfilling enough billable hours in the week and month, without without taking on too much overtime. Just whatever you budgeted for in your budget, right? That's the key to making money. It's not on any one job beating hours. So this is an example of a production incentive, and maintenance incentives. This whole billable hours payout is not as impactful. Beating your hours can backfire on quality. And so maintenance is more difficult. Quality is just as important. Sometimes you want to incentivize on upsales, right? Or you might want to create incentives around getting 5-star reviews. You may want incentives around density marketing. Can we market to the neighbors around our client? You've got to decide what's most important. What we used to do back in the day was what we called Hero of the Week. Now, in the introduction, they said that I talked about not having expectations incentives where you just get paid for showing up. Hero of the Week, by the way, however, contrarily speaking, was an incentive around doing the 5 most important things every week. And if you could be the leader in the team, you were the hero of the week and you got the bonus. But it was for just doing your job, but it was for showing leadership by hitting all standards correctly for that week. And what I've always thought and what I've always found out is, God, if everybody could just do their job, 100%, 95%, 90%, they could just do their job, we'd hit a home run. So to me, it's not terrible to have a kind of hero of the week program, to highlight the people that are the standard bearers and really hitting it out of the park. And you might do heroes of the week for everybody who hits those standards. Granted, this takes a lot of management. And so that's the negative. The positive is you should be managing these things anyways. So you've got to come up with a simple way to manage these things. And if you can, then it becomes a simple way to incentivize them. So we have covered so far profit sharing, commissions, incentives, and everything I've said. You got to talk to your state regulators. You got to talk to your HR lawyers. Make sure laws are always changing. You got to make sure you're within the laws, the Department of Labor laws, etc. I do want to end here by saying we're holding our Summer Growth Summit August 21st and 22nd. My clients are invited for a day early program as well. And Ryan Lawn and Tree is going to show us how they implement profit sharing and the great game of business, how they create employee ownership, how they create sort of professional pride, and where reward is in working at their company and not just the end of year reward, and how they package it all together. So if you go to my website and you go to the events page, you can sign up for this program. We're going to do total open book. Remember how I started off saying transparency is the underlying character you need? And you'll learn when you go to Ryan Lawn and Tree, these guys are so transparent. They're going to give us little booklets they've created. They're going to share everything because it's just how they live. They live on the bleeding edge of sharing. but they're always improving. Whatever they share with us this year, they'll have improved beyond it next year and the year before. And they're also trying to raise up the industry, as I am trying to do, and really many of you, I'm sure, are all trying to do. They're trying to raise up the industry. And so that's why they're being so transparent. And that's why you will learn a huge amount from them and from my team and from myself as we speak at the Summer Growth Summit. So that's my little call to action here. And with that, let's open it up for questions.
Thanks.
Danielle, what do you
Yeah.
got?
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. Just before we don't have any questions in the chat just yet, except for someone asked about the recording. I will be sending a recording later today. So if you have a question for Jeffrey, now would be the time to put it in there. And just a quick thank you to you, Jeffrey, for being so transparent yourself and sharing your absolute wealth of knowledge with us. And also, Team Engine has attended your Summer Growth Summit in the past. It's a great event. We can't recommend it enough to everyone to check that out. It's really a neat experience to be able to get that kind of behind the scenes peek at your peers in the industry. So thank you so much for everything today. And we have some questions starting to roll in.
Yeah,
Emily, go
I can
ahead.
kind of see them. I see Emily's. How
Yeah.
to avoid creating silos with department level bonus program. That's a really great question. So, first off, if you're going to do department based programs, you've got to do a fair test. Do they seem fair? Right? Let people from other departments know. Now, I know some people are afraid of that because uh, install is a heavier lift. They kind of earn more. They get a higher incentive. So, there's equal and then there's equitable. Equal says we're all earning the exact same. That's sort of communism. Equitable is, we're earning based on the amount of heavy lift we have to do. And so you've got to make some decisions yourself there, Emily. But I will say that if you're doing profit sharing and you're even doing it departmentally weighted, then that's a way to have us all work together, but with some departmentalization. And so it really depends, Emily, if you're trying to be equal or equitable. But it is definitely something you want to think about. And that's a reason you want to go slow when you're implementing a bonus program, because they can definitely backfire. Dominic asks, at what point are incentive plans too complex? You'll know it when you see it. Ask your team. They will tell you. Open, transparent discussion and feedback will help you get there. If don't have it too complex, too simple where it doesn't do anything, right? It's a bit of a balance, but ask your team. Jamel asks, is it appropriate to share the rewards incentives that each individual achieves in front of the whole team? That's a great question. And I'm going to think about this. If you're doing a team reward, it doesn't matter, right? If basically, I'm going to say it depends. So, for example, if you're asking people to refer their friends to come work at your company and you've got a reward, pay that reward in front of everybody. Let everybody see that. But if you're doing end of year bonuses based on how everybody did, no, that's confidential. So there's like two extremes for you to think about on that. Ian wants to start a new program. The company, would you go the profit sharing route or the commission based plan? So it's a great question. I will tell you that profit sharing has the least chance of backfiring versus a commission or incentive plan, which can have more unintended consequences. So at part, it depends on you, Ian. Like, what does your heart say? Because you have to live this every day, every week. Which one are you going to be happiest to live behind and work behind and put out there? But profit sharing definitely has the least amount of unintended consequences, and does the best at creating that we feeling. So it gets a couple pluses in that sense. And so the only caveat, Ian, is really depends on what kind of problem you're trying to fix. We have a sales problem. Okay, maybe you need commissions. No, we have an overall profitability and teamwork problem. Well, okay, then profit sharing definitely is going to help that. So that's my initial answer to you. And then depending on some of your answers to what I was saying would sort of show which route to get to. But all things being equal, I think I would do profit sharing. But that's all things being equal.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. The questions have slowed down. We're starting.
Wait, we
Yeah.
can't, we don't get one more question.
One more. Anybody?
Uh, let me just say that a few of you guys are in my peer groups. Ian, you're in my peer group, and I see a bunch of other names there. Paul's in the peer group. I see Paul Reeder there. Maybe you guys can just kind of do a quick testimonial for how it's helped you with your profit sharing commission incentive plans and just the growth of your business. Maybe you can just throw out a little shout out there while I tackle the last question. What are my thoughts on escalating bonus and step plans? Yeah, I think that's fine. Escalations can be built into commissions, right? You got to get beyond your base and then it goes up, or you got to get beyond your goal and then you get into the cream, right? So I totally like that. Todd Pugh, welcome, Todd. First party, know your numbers before you start. 1,000%, right? If you don't, you can't use incentives to fix your problems. And if you're losing money and it's in part because you don't know your numbers, obviously you would never throw any type of incentive plan onto any of that. The most important thing you can do is know your numbers and then even just start sharing your numbers. Back to your transparency and your trust with your people is a heavy incentive. And a big obstacle I see a lot is I'm afraid to share my numbers because I don't fully understand them. That's okay. Don't throw an incentive on it, but that's okay if you don't fully understand it. This is going to sound backwards, but a great way that teachers learn is by teaching. So when you get out there, and maybe you'll do it with your leadership team, and you start sharing the numbers and getting the questions, you don't have to know everything. And by explaining the numbers in a safer environment, you are going to learn. If you wait till you fully have them internalize and understand them, you will never get off the go. And so starting somewhere where there's no money attached and you're sharing and talking is a great way to go. Todd, if you have any other thoughts there, please chime in. James, thanks for that shout out on our peer groups. Anything else? Ian is giving a shout out. Paul's giving a shout out. Man, look at that, Paul. Really appreciate that. So there's a couple shout outs. Todd, thanks for saying that. I want to just thank Team Engine. You guys are great. I'll tell you why I like Team Engine. They're not corporate at all. They are a corporation, but they're not corporate. They're flexible. They're adaptive. They want to help. They've come with a unique product. I think others are catching up to your uniqueness, right, in terms of how you first got going. But you have a unique angle in that you're really trying to go after the blue collar worker and help companies with that. So great angle. You guys are willing to pivot. You have a youthful spirit. So I think a lot of positives with Team Engine.
Thanks, Jeffrey. We've really found a good product market fit with the landscaping industry and seen a lot of great growth there for sure.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for sticking around to the end, for being engaged in questions and answers. We've got another testimonial coming in the chat still for Jeffrey. So yeah, thanks again, Jeffrey, for sharing all your knowledge with us and everyone for being here. We'll send a recording later today and we'll see you at the next one.
Let's do this again, Danielle. This was great.
We will. Have a
All
good
right.
one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.